So if you are a communist, especially a Marxist, just as I said last week, you need to go read yourself some Ilyenkov. And if you still struggle to accept the fact that you do need to learn theory, I'm going to try and explain it in this video, and also try and explain a couple more concepts from Ilyenkov's works that I've already started talking about. But it isn't just that the theory is going to help you predict the future because you're going to be able to see the dialectical patterns. It is mainly because you have to be able to see the world clearly in order to change it. You have to understand the rules of the game before you go on and try and do something differently. Because a lot of the people make this mistake, and they have made this mistake in the past. And some people really love to talk about the victims of communism, which usually they're not actually coming in good faith. We know that. But people like to bash on the socialist projects without the understanding that this is what's going to happen inevitably, and you have to try your hardest to avoid some of these, and it is still going to happen. Mistakes are still going to be made. And that is not to say that we have to learn theory perfectly well before we start building any kind of projects. Of course, this is silly, but we've got to be prepared as we can. And also, my firm belief is that I'm not going to see socialism or communism. The generation that comes after me is most likely going to start building some kind of socialist projects. And then in 2, 3, 4 generations or so, socialism is going to start transitioning to communism. People are going to start building the society that is based around the principle from each according to ability to each according to the need. And I'm not going to see any of that. And you're not going to see any of that most likely either, unless you live for 300 years. So any vampires out there may be able to see the future. But this, however, does not mean that we should not work towards that goal, and we should not create the type of prototype communities that the future generations are going to be either inspired by or discouraged from. And they've got a lot of bad examples already. We already have a lot of what not to do type of communities. So we've got to kind of try and find a way that is going to be the most beneficial, at least at the first stages of building socialist projects. And this is why we need to study dialectics, because dialectics ultimately show us that it is in the struggle the unity is found. And the concept of oneness, which as far as I could gather is the concept of identity in philosophy, which is the same kind of an identity as in math. It means equal to. However, in dialectics and in philosophy in general, and of course dialectics is the only type of philosophy that will truly be able to help you understand the world the way it is, not the way we perceive it to be, not the way we project it to be, etc. But the oneness, the identity in dialectics is not an equation. It is not A equals B. It is A is becoming a B, but it still remains an A. And some people may say, that's impossible. You're either or. And that is the linear, formal type of logic that is not serving us. It hasn't been serving us for a long, long time. It stops serving us when we stop being children. When we're children, yes, we do need very clear-cut instructions. This is good, this is bad, don't do this is going to kill you, etc. But as we grow older and learn more and more about the world, we come to realize that no, nothing is white or black. Nothing is good or bad. Nothing is this or that. It is always the process of becoming that we are observing, even in our simple day-to-day lives. And the concept of the oneness or identity is one of the crucial concepts to understand in dialectics, because one of its principles is that the way you think, right, the way your mind works is a reflection of the material world. Remember way back when I said consciousness is the universe reflecting on itself or thinking about itself or trying to understand itself. And this reminds people a lot of different Buddhist postulates, which was another view of dialectics, another dialectical method that was ancient that people used to be able to understand the world. And peoples of all cultures throughout the history of humankind used different dialectical methods in order to understand the world. Marx was not the first one. Hegel was not the first one. There were multiple people before them who were thinking about this. There were societies that were built using dialectical science, but they had limited technology for various reasons. So this is why we didn't see the rise of all of these wonderful civilizations, etc., etc. But this is a different conversation altogether. This is more speculative. But going back to oneness and how the principle of oneness is to align the way you reflect the world with the actual material reality. And this is what I argue is one of the key issues a lot of us may have nowadays, except for obviously exploitation, which is not allowing us to not only live our lives and fulfill our potential, but it's actively killing us. But in the way we relate to each other, the way that we organize together, we've got to understand the principle of oneness and the way that ideology is affecting us. Because when we are ideological in our thinking, which is everyone is going to have certain ideology, be it Christian ideology, white supremacist ideology, myth, all kinds of mythos that capitalism gives you is going to be not based on the actual material circumstances. It's going to reflect to you whatever it needs in order to replicate itself. And it doesn't happen because there are some evil forces at play. It is normal, it is natural for such ways of thinking to exist because we need to make sense of the world. So we start explaining away the things that actually are, but instead of explaining them away, what we need to do is actually get to the essence, the core of each and every subject matter and object. And this is what dialectical materialism ultimately is concerned with. It is concerned with understanding the material reality and aligning the way you think about the world with the way the world is, which sounds on the surface level as the goal of any kind of a science, the goal of any kind of philosophy. But the vast majority of the ways of thinking that we have accessible to us now, they are not allowing us to see the actual material reality. This is why people are going to argue until they're blue in the face about how Marx was wrong about the surplus value, and there is some kind of magical property to value that exists in nature. And they are going to use all kinds of mythos to try and debunk Marx, which you can criticize Marx, you can add on to Marx, just as Marina Burik, for example, did with her work, A Virtualized World of Capitalism, which is a very, very, very good modern application of the dialectical materialist Marxist analysis. Marx's word is not the word of God. Marx was not right about everything. However, he did point out the crucial, the essential, the core of capitalism. He identified the core contradiction of capitalism, and thus he predicted that socialism, as a negation of capitalism, is necessarily going to arise. It's not necessarily that he wanted it even if he did not want it, he would still come to this conclusion because of the premise and because of where this premise came from. It did not come from his head. It came from the right interpretation of the data. The way he understood the oneness of the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, that how one does not exist without the other, how the profit does not just appear out of thin air. He applied Hegelian dialectics to the material reality, and he came to the very right conclusion about surplus value, and it is correct. Nobody was truly able to debunk it, and a lot of the so-called debunking of Marx's theory of surplus value has been pretty laughable so far. I have never seen anything that actually makes sense, even. And a lot of the people who want to convince themselves they can debunk Marx, they end up actually making fools out of themselves. So yeah, it is not something that is possible to do because it is the truth. And same goes for everything else. So we can apply the principle of oneness, the principle of aligning the way we think with the material reality in everything. We can do it in our relationships. We can do it in our organizing. When we sit down and reflect about why we may be angry about certain aspects of other people's behavior, or certain aspects of organizing with others, when we sit and reflect and look for that contradiction, look for that essence, when we self-reflect on our own being, our own identity, and how it has been forming in the condition it has been forming in, then we're going to be able to arrive at the not the notion, but the actual conceptualization, just as I spoke about last week. And this is going to take a long time. This is not going to take a week. This is not going to take a month. This is going to take years, and it's never going to be over. And meanwhile, you will have to continue living and organizing and doing whatever you can to continue surviving and to possibly start building those minuscule little tiny blocks from which our offspring, the next generations, are going to build their socialist projects from. But it is ultimately going to benefit us directly when we start thinking dialectically, when we realize that there is no right or wrong. There is something that is just going to happen because of the laws that this object or subject matter possesses within itself. And those laws are pretty universal. It is the struggle and the unity of the opposites. It is that nothing is ever the same. Everything changes all the time, and everything becomes its own negation in meantime. Everything that has been born has an end, has its time to die. Everything exists in a relationship with everything else. So these are the core principle of dialectics, and I think I'm forgetting some. Oh yeah, the last one is the quantity and quality, which is basically the change and the kind of evolution of everything, the development of everything. So these are the core principles of the universe, but they do apply concretely. In every single situation, you will have to get to the essence, get to the core of an issue, and then look for a contradiction. And this is it. This may even appear as too simple to be effective, but it is. So this is why I actively encourage everyone to read Ilyenkov, especially if you don't feel like you are comfortable reading Hegel. I would say Ilyenkov was a Hegel whisperer. He was a Hegel, Marx, and Lenin whisperer. He was able to interpret these folks really well. He was able to expand on what they were saying, and he was a great pedagogue. He was able to explain things in a pretty precise and plain language. So please check him out. Let me know what you think. Happy holidays to you all. Consider supporting me on Patreon. Obviously, take care of yourself and your community first. Subscribe to me on all the other social medias, even though I don't do much there. And I'll talk to you sometime later.